So we're in your culinary book and we're going on to Unit 6. And now we're going to be talk about some of the things that accompany each meal. In Chapter 12, we're going to talk about grains and breads. So 12, Section 1, grains. So the types of grains. Grains and cereals are an important part of your balanced diet. Rice, corn, oats, and wheat are some of the most common types of grains. We have whole grains, and whole grains are grain products that have the bran and the germ intact. So we're going to talk about the different layers of grains, bran and germ being two of those layers. So when you have whole grains, you're thinking of the whole grain, of course, which include the bran and the germ. And this makes it, having the bran and germ on the grain makes them more nutritious. They're a more nutritious form of grain. In a whole grain, the kernel, the outer layer, is called the bran. So let's look here. The outer layer of a kernel is the bran. Just remember that. And it provides for fiber, vitamin B, vitamins, and minerals. So the outer layer is very good for you, the bran. The endosperm, and that's the portion that is separated and refined to be used in products that are not whole grain, contains the carbohydrates and a little protein as well as some B vitamins. So when you think of endosperm, you think of that when you have not in a whole grain. You know, basically it's just that layer, that endosperm, that portion that's separated to refine it. And then, of course, we have the germ. So we're talking about three parts so far. We have the bran, the outer layer. We have the endosperm and the germ. The germ contains the antitoxins such as vitamin E, vitamin B, minerals, and fats. And so the germ, too, is very nutritious. So when grains are refined, the bran and the germ are removed. And this causes a loss of important nutrients, but improves the shelf life, preserves it longer. So if you take the bran and the germ out, the grain will probably last longer, right? So a lot of times they have done this. And then too, because of the loss of nutrients from the bran and the germ taken away, they have to enrich the grain, add back the vitamins and stuff, so that you will not be missing those vitamins such as vitamin B and minerals and these things. Vitamin E are all in the bran and the germ, but also it's missing out on some fiber. Okay, so let's go here a little. Go down a little further here. Oops, sorry. Oh, okay, here we go. Rice. So let's focus in here. I haven't focused in very good. Hope you can see this. Rice is a staple food in many regions of the world. A lot of different parts of the world grow rice, but most of these countries are warm and marshy areas. So let me move this. There we go. Warm and marshy areas, and there are countless varieties of rice. So each has its own uses. We have brown rice, and brown rice has minimal processing. So it retains the bran and the germ and the endosperm in the brown rice, so it's healthier. It's the most nutritious form of rice, and it kind of has a nut-like flavor to it, brown rice. Because white rice has the germ and the bran removed, it must be enriched, and so again it is. And then we have long grain rice, and it's often drier than the other types of rice, which causes the grains to separate more easily when cooked. So it's actually drier rice. The short grain rice is higher in starch and content and stickier rice, the short grain. The long grain are, you can see that by that picture there in the corner. You can see the long grain being, there we go, focus in, there in the corner. You can see the wild rice mixed in with the short rice, and the long grain being drier. Two processed forms of rice. We have converted rice and we have instant rice. You can get them from the grocery store. So what's the difference? Converted rice is steamed until it's partially cooked, and then it's milled and packaged. So let's go on to the next here. So it's packaged It's the process of converting rice was designed to retain nutrients and reduce starch content. However, the process makes the grain unusually hard, increasingly requiring cooking time. So the converted rice is not as popular, and it basically it reduces the starch content, but again, it's a little bit hard. So instant rice is completely cooked, and then it's dehydrated, and its quick cooking time makes it very popular and convenient for many people because you can cook it very quick. Special varieties of rice can be used to make certain dishes. Okay, let's go over these special types of rice. See if we can point them out here. So here's one we have. Arborio rice is an Italian rice that is used to make risotto or risotto. It's made of short, starchy grains. The rice is stirred often and cooked to release the starch, and then the mixture becomes very creamy. So just arborio rice is Italian rice. And on to another type of rice we have, although categorized with rice and used in many of the same ways, wild rice. So here we got wild rice here, is the seed of grass that is grown in marshy areas. The wild rice is a dark brownish black color. When you think of wild, you think of the darker color, and has a very rich flavor. Wild rice is often blended with other varieties of rice to create a contrast in color, texture, and flavor, and to lower the cost of the wild rice. So and there are many other forms of rice too. So those are just some of the basic types of rice. Okay, let's talk about corn now. What about corn? Corn is another type of grain that has many uses. You know, I love corn, you know. In fact, if anybody would ask, what is your grandma's favorite food, she'd probably say corn, you know, or corn on the cob or such. Well, corn is typically grouped with vegetables. When you eat it fresh, it's a vegetable. But with grains, when it's been dried corn is turned into cornmeal. And this cornmeal is a grain. So it's both a vegetable and a grain. And it can be used, the main ingredients in food, there's lots of different, like cornbread, grits, polenta, all of these are corn, and there's a lot of, you know, corn chips and such made of corn grain. So oats, let's talk about oats. You know, like oatmeal or oats. Oats are one of the most common whole grains in the American diet. Oats are good for you. Oats are milled and processed in several different ways to make them easier for various applications. Oat groats here. Oat groats are oats that retain the germ, bran, and endosperm. So when you think of oat groats, you think of really oats that are high in vitamins because they still have the germ and the bran, you know, as long as in the endosperm, all three. And they are least processes, and as a result, they have the highest nutritional value. But oat groats take longer to cook than any other of the other varieties of oats. So oat groats take a while to cook. So they're not as popular because of that reason. And then we have old-fashioned oats, and they've been steamed and flattened and rolled out. And onto the quick cooking oats have been steamed, rolled, and cut into small pieces to reduce the cooking time. So old-fashioned oats, quick cooking oats, instant oats have been partially cooked and then dehydrated, so making them, they're already partly cooked, so they take less. So you think of oat groats, let's go back, oat groats, old-fashioned oats, quick cooking oats, and instant oats. So instant oats cook more quickly than the other varieties of oats, and they're sold in a variety of instant oat flavors, right? We get them. We can actually put them in the microwave and add some water to them. Old-fashioned oats and quick cooking oats can be used interchangeably in recipes, but instant oats cannot. So you can't just put in instant oats in a recipe unless it states instant oats. So just remember that, because that would be a big problem if you did. It says, although it can be milled in many ways, wheat. Let's talk about wheat now. We're talking about oats, now we're going to talk about wheat. Wheat is what's usually ground into flour. So flour made from wheat is the only type of flour that's available. So if you get flour, it's going to be made from wheat. That's what it's known for. So it's generally used for baking. Flour is. Three of the most common refined wheat flours are all-purpose flour, bread flour, and cake flour. So what's the difference there? Here we have all-purpose flour, bread flour, and cake flour. All-purpose flour can be used for any type of baking and in other cooking applications such as making roux. Remember we made roux? Roux is made from flour mixed with some kind of fat, like fat from drippings from a turkey to make gravy, or some kind of fat mixed with the flour to make a roux. And roux is a basic. You can make white sauce and all kinds of things with the roux. It's usually purchased, flour is usually purchased, all-purpose flour is usually purposed and pre-sifted. Used to, we had to sift flour all the time, but now it's available already pre-sifted, and it's also available bleached or unbleached. So, so that's all-purpose flour. Now let's go on to bread flour. Bread flour is made of hard, high protein, high gluten wheat, which gives breads a higher volume and a better structure. So remember, it's high gluten if you have a gluten intolerance, right? Bread flour is made of hard, high protein. So, and then cake flour is made from soft wheat, which produces tender baked goods in a fine texture. So, what are the three common types? All-purpose flour, bread flour, and cake flour. So, which are different. Whole wheat flour is less refined than many other varieties and includes the entire ground wheat kernel, which includes the bran, and the bran and the endosperm and the whole, the whole kit and caboodle, right? So anyway, see whole wheat. We're going whole wheat here. Because whole wheat flour retains a small amount of natural fat from the grain, whole wheat flour must be kept refrigerated or frozen to prevent it becoming rancid or spoiled. So when you have whole wheat flour, you have to keep it in the refrigerator. So, and this flour has a nut-like flavor, as other whole wheat products do, and provides nutrition that is more highly. It's more highly. This flour is not highly processed, as others. When whole wheat flour is used for baked goods, it is usually combined with another more refined flour. When used alone, whole wheat flour produces a very heavy, dense texture. So, whole wheat flour. So, of course, has the germ, the bran, and the endosperm, all three, in that. But it becomes very dense, the whole wheat flour, and has to be refrigerated. So those two things to know with whole wheat flour. So self-rising flour is another type of flour. And self-rising flour is a convenience product that is made by adding other ingredients to the all-purpose flour so that it self-rises, So for every cup of plain flour that you have, for self-rising flour is added 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt are added. So if you have all-purpose flour, a recipe calls for self-rising flour. You may put in some baking powder and salt in a 1-cup measure and then add it to have self-rising flour. The only difference, just to remember, self-rising flour is going to have other things added to it to get it to rise, and these things would be baking powder and a mixture of baking powder and salt. Baking powder actually gets it to rise. So self-rising flour is a little different. So when you have self-rising flour, you're not going to have to add baking powder. But if you have regular, all-purpose flour, you might have to add in the recipe baking powder to it. So to avoid adding too much or too little baking powder or salt, use self-rising flour only in recipes that call for it. So when you have a recipe, it has to say self-rising flour to use it. So another common grain product now is cereal, breakfast cereal. So, and it's available in numerous options. Ready to eat cereal or hot cereal both. and look for options usually that are low in sugar and high in fiber. So lot of cereals have a lot of sugar in them, so you have to read the labels to see. And the sugar can be extremely high in some that are added, with certain sugar pieces in it or so. So a lot of times people add sugar to their cereals too. After they put it on the table, they put milk and sugar on it. That's what we used to do. Anyway, it's important to read and compare labels. So let's go back up here where it says cooking breakfast cereal. So you gather here's a cooking example. You're going to gather all your equipment. Either if you're going to have oatmeal, grits, or whole wheat cereal. Saucepan, stirring, spoon, in a bowl. And then you follow the directions on the package usually. So it says, to help prevent you making. So you're going to be stirring. Say you're making you're making a hot wheat cereal or oatmeal. So to prevent lumping, the cereal should be gently stirred as it's added to the boiling water. So you have the boiling water, and as you're adding, you have to make sure you stir it constantly. Otherwise, you'll have lumps. Like cream of wheat would have lumps in it. During cooking, stir the cereal very gently. The cereal will become gummy if it's over stirred. So you don't want to stir it too much after that point, or it'll become gummy. So use the medium heat. And if the temperature is too hot, the cereal will lump and scorch. So don't turn it up too hot, just low to medium heat. And continue to cook the cereal for a short time after it's thickened. And thoroughly cooking cereal prevents raw, starchy flavors and softens the cellulose and improves the texture. So the key to it is to make sure you're stirring, especially when you add, because you don't want to have lumps. Then after the lumps are gone, to make sure you don't stir too much to get it to look too starchy, and to make sure that you cook it enough, but not too much. So there's a very thin line where you have to see when it's actually talent to making cooking breakfast cereal. So let's go and talk about the allergies, because gluten is a big allergy nowadays. So gluten intolerance. So allergies and intolerances. Gluten allergy or gluten intolerance. They're both certain types of problems when dealing with grains. So gluten is a protein found in certain grains such as wheat, barley, rye, and it produces elasticity and stability to breads, grains, and other foods. So gluten is actually a good thing if you can tolerate it. It's in all wheat, it's in all barley, and all rye breads, and it provides the breads so they're elastic and and they hold up. So gluten is what makes bread or pizza crust very chewy, and it helps to give structure to breads as they rise. So but over the last few decades, there's been a rise in medical intolerances related to gluten. So a lot of people are intolerant to gluten. So, and it's in all these breads and all these grains. So one of these health problems is called celiac disease, and it's an autoimmune disease in which the gluten triggers an autoimmune reaction that attacks and inflames the intestines. So their intestines are inflamed with this celiac disease with gluten intolerance. So this creates gastrointestinal distress and prevents nutrients from being absorbed. So as they eat the gluten, the gluten from the breads the vitamins won't be absorbed, because it hurts the gastrointestinal tract in doing this. Instead of having an autoimmune reaction after eating gluten or wheat, some people have a wheat allergy that can cause a range of symptoms. So not just intolerance, you can have an allergy where it would be more severe and have symptoms like you get hives or skin irritations, or even having breathing issues for anaphylactic. So some people are very, very allergic to gluten. And to control these conditions is to not have gluten, right? Is to eat a gluten-free diet. So that takes a lot of different grains out of your diet, well, especially wheat. So Those with severe allergy or celiac disease may need to take extensive measures to avoid wheat or gluten, such as using separate pots and pans, even, and separate utensils to prevent cross contamination from gluten from breads. So it can become very serious. Those on a gluten-free diet may be lacking certain nutrients because they're not can't eat bread, so they lack fiber, they lack thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, vitamin B12, folate, vitamin D, magnesium, calcium, and zinc. So there's a lot of vitamins they lack, so they have to take vitamins in the midst of this if you're not eating grains. Some of the nutrient deficiency comes from not eating grains. However, deficiency may also occur if the body cannot absorb. They're not only not eating, but they're not absorbing these vitamins. So they need to eat plenty of fresh fruits, vegetables, legumes, nuts, gluten-free grains such as amarmouth, buckwheat, corn, millet, oats, rice, and sorghum. So there's a lot of things they need to eat instead of eating wheat grains. So because gluten and wheat can be included in unexpected products, they have to look in products such as salad dressing to look to see if there is any gluten in. So gluten isn't not just in breads and grains, but it can be in other things. So for baking flour, it says here, it's for baking, flour made from almonds, coconut, oats, or rice can be used. So they have to substitute the grains with almond, coconuts, oats, or rice because those are gluten free. So just to know if someone has a gluten allergy, which is becoming very popular these days. So separating and storing grain products. So or not separating, preparing and storing grain products, preparing and storing grain products. Cooking grain can be done easy if you apply basic principles. You begin by measuring water and grain accurately. If you measure it, for rice, the general ratio is 2 parts water to 1 part grain. So you can measure, if you have a cup of grain, you're going to want 2 cups of water otherwise. But other grains vary slightly, so you should measure and cook them according to their package directions. Instead of using water, you can use broth, you can use milk or juice to give the cooked grain additional flavor. So you can say, well, it says water, well, maybe I'll use milk. Or how about I'll use some chicken broth, and that may make it just even better, taste better. So after you select your ingredients, bring the cooking liquid to a boil and then add the grain. So boil the liquid, water or whatever, boil it, and then you're going to add the grain. To cook rice and certain other grains, you may follow the steps to finish cooking them. Once the rice has been added to the cooking liquid, bring the liquid back to a boil. So you add the rice, and then it's not going to boil for a while. Then you bring it back to the boil, and then you reduce the heat to just barely simmer. After it's boiling again, you reduce the heat to just very simmering, and then you cover the pan very tight and don't lift it. Just keep that steam in there. So then you cover the pan. You've already stirred it in, and you've already brought it to a boil, and you turn the heat down, and now you're just going to leave it sit there at very, very low, low temperature, simmering it. Do not remove the lid while you're cooking the rice. The steam that is trapped inside the pan cooks the rice. So if there's still cooking liquid present after the recommended cooking time has passed, then the rice will be tender, and then you drain the excess liquid, if there's any liquid in there. At the end of the cooking time, the liquid has been absorbed, but the rice is still hard, then you're going to add more liquid. So say you covered it for 15 minutes, how many minutes it tells you to, you take it off, and you still have a little bit of liquid, and you can just drain the liquid off and make sure the rice is still tender. But if the rice is hard, then you're going to have to cook it a little bit longer to make it tender, because you don't want to have hard pieces of rice, right? Since stirring during cooking to release starch and make rice sticky, avoid stirring the rice until it's cooked. That's why you don't take off the lid and start stirring it, because the more you stir it, you're going to get it to be very starchy, and to the point that it's so starchy that you're not going to want to eat it. So after you take the lid off and it's just perfect, then you just fluff it with a fork a little bit. Maybe put some butter on it if you need to. If you like, add lemon or butter or whatever you like to that, add to the rice, or just fluff it and it's ready to eat for rice. Storing grains. So you store uncooked grains in a cool, dry place for up to a year, in your pantry for about a year. If stored in the freezer, they should be used for 2 years. So if you put it in the freezers, 2 years. Whole grains have a higher fat content that than processed or highly milled grains do, and they can become rancid. So whole grains result of decomposing oil can be recognized by its strong odor and bad taste. So if it gets rancid, you don't want it. So the whole grain flour is best to put that whole grain flour in the refrigerator or freezer and use it within 6 months. Otherwise, when it's rancid, it will taste bad. So. Cooked grains can be safely stored in a refrigerator up to 5 after you cook it. Say you cooked rice or whatever, you can put it in the refrigerator up for 5 days or in the freezer for 6 months. So after you cook it and it's ready, you can put the grains, put the grains in the refrigerator, or put them in the freezer. So pasta. I'm going to go over pasta because section 2 is pretty quick. So pasta. Characteristics of pasta. Pasta ranges in size and shape from very small, round couscous to large, flat lasagna, many shapes and many sizes. Pasta has so much variety for any dish. You can make your dishes look different just by the kind of pasta you have. It also comes in different colors and in different flavors. So some of the most common flavors of pasta are like tomato pasta, spinach pasta, whole wheat pasta. So different kinds of pasta. Other special types of pasta are varieties, such as ravioli, tortellini. They're stuffed because usually these tortellinis are stuffed with little cheese or meat fillings in them. So you can make a meal of pasta with meat fillings and cheese inside. So nutrition. Pasta is a valuable addition to the diet. It's a good selection from the grains group. It's in the grains group. And if you cook it proper, it's called al dente. Al dente means the pasta is al dente, cooked perfectly tender but firm to the bite. So you taste it. So a good cook would take a little bit of pasta and taste it to see if it's tender but it's still firm. You don't want it to be mushy. So pasta will be digested more slowly and will provide energy for several hours. So that means a lot of times, different athletes, they like to have pasta, a few hours prior to when, because it gives a lot of energy. Pasta is often made with enriched flour, so it can add nutrition too. So let's go back here to tips and techniques for cooking pasta. So, because we want to cook some pasta here. So, when cooking pasta, you follow the directions on the recipe or on the box or wherever, on the package. So you take 1 ounce of dried pasta usually yields about a half a cup of cooked pasta. So 1 ounce to half a cup, so and half a cup is about, one person's meal, right? So use 1 cup of cooking water per ounce of pasta and bring the water to a boil before adding the pasta. So 1 cup of cooking water we're talking about per ounce. And then you add a half to 1 teaspoon of salt to the water for every 8 ounces of pasta. So make sure you add some salt to the water. And then for additional flavor, you can also add dry herbs if you want to the water. Adding 1 tablespoon of vegetable oil or olive oil will prevent the pasta from sticking, but the oil could cause the sauce not to adhere to the cooked pasta. So, I always like to add a little bit of cooking oil to the water when I'm cooking pasta so that it doesn't stick all together. And it actually works pretty good. Just don't add too much, as they say, because then if you want to put spaghetti sauce or some sauce on it, the sauce kind of like the oil makes the sauce just slide off a bit, which I don't mind but some people do. So boil with the lid off of the pasta stirring occasionally to prevent the pasta from sticking. And then taste the pasta for doneness. Is it al dente? Al dente, is it firm, but not too firm? So you always taste the pasta with a fork. Take a little piece and taste it. Overcooking pasta will give the pasta very poor texture, very mushy pasta. Use a colander to then drain the pasta, and don't rinse the pasta with cold water unless it goes into a cold salad. If it's going into a cold salad, you can rinse it with cold water, but only if it's going into a cold salad. Otherwise, you don't need to rinse. So when serving pasta as a side dish, such as a pasta salad, 1/2 to 1/4 cup of cooked pasta per serving. So, people can eat about a half cup of pasta. So it says when serving pasta as a main dish, such as spaghetti, plan 1 to 1/4 cups per serving. So there's several ways to reheat pasta. You can put it in boiling water for 1 to 2 minutes just to reheat it, or you can pour boiling water over the pasta to reheat it, or you can just cook the pasta and reheat it in the microwave. So tips and techniques for cooking pasta. So let's go on to the last part here and we'll be done. Storing and purchasing pasta. So here are some pictures of pasta here. So pasta that is purchased carefully and stored properly will have a long shelf life. You can keep it for a long time. Dried pasta can be purchased in boxes or bags, but always avoid pasta that has broken pieces in it. You don't want to take that. Choose pasta that has a smooth, even appearance and not a marbled appearance. If it has a marbled appearance, maybe old pasta. Dried pasta can be kept for 1 to 2 years if it's stored in an airtight container and kept in a cool, dry place, like a pantry. Fresh pasta can be made at home, but is also available in prepackaged in the refrigerator case at the grocery store. So fresh pasta should be packaged in dry containers because any moisture inside the packaging can cause mold. So homemade fresh pasta will remain fresh in the refrigerator for about 3 days after you cook it. And it should be packaged pasta should be cooked before it reaches its expiration date, of course. Once opened, packages of fresh pasta should be used within 3 days. So, high quality frozen pasta will be solidly frozen in individual pieces and not in a solid block. Check the package for freezer burn. Make sure it doesn't have any ice crystals or dry white spots on it in the freezer. And it can be kept in the freezer for up to 9 months. So once opened, you keep the uncooked portion of frozen and use it within 3 months. So here's pasta. Some pictures of pasta, making pasta, I guess. And I don't know if you ever made pasta, but it's quite a deal to make pasta. It's very much easier to go to the store and buy the dried pasta than to make it. But making it is pretty fun. But you have to get a recipe for that. So we're going to go on to the next section. In the next video, maybe we'll do, it's going to be 2. We're going to be talking about quick breads in the next section.